a co-opted member of the CEC committee, so we're really tough to have her here today. She has also brought a panel with her, which is great, and it's going to include some of the staff here from Dartmoor, including Ben and Scott, who is our Director of Animals back there. So hi Scott. Panicking now because I've put him in the spotlight. So they'll be doing the panel in a minute. But yeah, I'm going to hand over to Lorna. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. And really, really great to be here today. Really good to see you. This is the first time I've spoken to real human beings in a room for about 3 years. So really excited. I can see you, but I need to wear my glasses to see what I'm going to be chatting about. So I'm here today to present on social change for nature, as Colin said, a co-opted member of the Conservation and Education Committee for BIAZA. I have over 25 years of working in the natural environment sector, 5 years as a primary teacher in a large-scale primary school in London. I worked for the Wildlife Trust, the Royal Geographical Society, Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, and now for the RSPB. I've written learning resources packs and activities for ZSL, the National Aquarium and the Deep, and was the lead on formal learning at a member organisation of BIAZA WWT. So today, I stand here as a co-opted member with a collective hat on, channeling brilliant, great ideas that I've heard from many people like yourselves over the years as to how we collectively crack getting everyone alongside us taking action for nature. Across the UK, there are thousands of committed people dedicating their time and effort to protecting wildlife and wild places. Many of them sat in this room today. Every day, we all work with colleagues who share our passion, our values, our determination to save the natural world. However, whilst 89% of the UK population say that they are concerned about damage to the environment, the issue fares badly up against NHS, immigration, or crime, with just 7% of the population putting the environment amongst the most important issues facing Britain. It appears that this only rises up the agenda in response to events such as severe flooding close to home. We need to find a way of breaking through into the public consciousness and ensuring that the state of nature, both here and abroad, is seen to be as important to our survival as the state of the National Health Service. In fact, with increasing research indicating the benefits of nature on enhancing our well-being, the preservation and promotion of green spaces, wildlife, biodiversity would alleviate pressure on the NHS. Of course, we want everyone to be on board, but as with any pivotal social movement, we know it's a matter of momentum. Those that are already with us will be essential in tipping the balance. History has proven that a committed minority can change wider public attitudes and behaviour and be the catalyst for change. In the wake of Blue Planet 2, we've seen the ripple effect across Britain and beyond. It has led to a tangible shift in public discourse about plastics, as well in individual action and pressure on government to tackle this problem. Of course, reaching this positive tipping point is more complex and multifaceted than the Blue Planet effect alone. It is, however, undeniable that this issue has gained traction with the public and policymakers alike, and this momentum looks set to create a path to real change in our future relationships with plastics. So research suggests that 25% of the population need to be behind any large-scale social change. We already know that around a third of the population are wildlife enthusiasts and share our love and concern for nature. So this level of support is not beyond our reach. We know that in 2019, 35 million people came to BIAZA member organisations. And in 2021, despite COVID pandemic, 25 million people came to BIAZA member organisations. So this is really critical for what we do. We need 1 in 4 people to join us. Nature doesn't have a voice, but we do. We need people from all walks of life to be talking about the importance of wildlife and our natural world, to both create a pro-environmental movement, but also support inclusivity and access to nature for all. We need people to be demonstrating to those in power that there's an appetite and urgency to create a better deal for nature. And we also need people to be taking whatever action they can, on their own or collectively, to help create a nature-filled future. Hopefully, in the next 10 minutes or so, I'll be able to give you some top tips, collected from multiple thoughts and creative ideas from across the industry, to do stuff at your collections in order to start to create the social change for nature we need to see. In the spirit of a people-powered movement, I asked multiple people for their top tips. Most said we need to become more relevant, diversify. We need to work where people live. And as Tim Hyman said in their hashtag New Power book, we need to be current, we need to be made for many, we need to be peer-driven, and we need to be open. So what do these top tips look like? Well, first of all, we need to be clear on our cause, our purpose. We're good at conservation, but we need to be clearer about the cause with people. We need to stay true to that cause, true to our missions, true to our principles. We need to be seen to do the right thing, but we also need to do the right thing. We need to upskill and train staff in people-powered approaches, enable and empower staff so they can lead by example. We need to be clear, solution-focused. Why do we need this change? We need to share authentic messages, show regular people how nature is relevant to their everyday priorities, particularly now. Health, finance, family. We need to create opportunities to support wildlife in ways that fit with different lifestyles and priorities. We need to understand and get to know the communities around us, diverse communities, everyone. We need to network, meet, chat, exchange. We also need to nurture our known audiences and followers, absolutely critical. And continue to diversify internally in our collections, not only bottom up through staff, but top down through governance structures, and externally through programmes and projects. We need to give more young people a genuine voice through authentic youth boards, councils, forums. We need to work with those new influencers who reflect diversity in society and who themselves believe in our cause. Use social media, use word of mouth, and really important, strengthen current and new partnerships. We need to acknowledge that we can't do it all. Collectively, we do have a huge audience engagement. I've said it already, 35 million to Piazza collections in 2019 and 25 million in 2021. But we need to recognise that it's not just about us. We need to work with partners, work with businesses, work with others who are leading action for nature's recovery. And we need to learn from others and recognise that we're not always the experts. That humility in the room is really vital. We need to be creative. I'm looking at a room full of what I imagine is creative people. So creative and dynamic ways to broadcast the message and the cause and have fun with it. The theme of the conference. Collaborate with creatives. Go to where people are. Be active in local areas and activate local people. Work with community champions and we have one today. Individuals, groups, organisations. Train and support people in local communities to be campaigners or leaders for nature, for wildlife and biodiversity in their workplace, in their community, in their school. Empower people to be effective political advocates. MPs are far more likely to listen to real constituents than ENGOs. An idea. We can create a national citizen science programme, a collaboration across a colossal network of multiple ENGOs and all the Piazza collections. Or in that local community, another idea, co-create a community empowerment toolkit, a way that that local community can take action for nature themselves. And with schools, we need to push for nature to be embedded in the fabric of school life. Work in, with and through schools, empowering and upskilling teachers so schools become green, nature-rich, wildlife, biodiversity-rich schools on their own terms. We need to continue to build connection to nature, to wildlife, to conservation in all the work that we do with children, young people and adults. And we need to expand our education and learning programme to reach through schools and children to families and communities. And finally, we need to allocate long-term budget against movement building, making sure sufficient budget is against this as a long-term endeavour. Short-term budgets and reliance on project funding often break trust with people. We need to be consistent, stay active and measure impact. Learn from each other, chat, exchange, not just in those local communities, but amongst ourselves. And monitor the behaviour change that is happening. And a critical one, be prepared to change if something's not working. We need to run public-facing campaigns, encourage individuals and communities to take action for nature at home or locally. And we need to celebrate, really celebrate and showcase how people are contributing to nature's recovery and conservation. And again, I've said it already, but in the spirit of this conference, we need to have fun through it all. We have Professor Justin Dillon. Justin is currently at UCL and is Chair of Trustees for the Exeter Science Centre. We also have Rachel Rafiki, local community member, local councillor, and also director of a local community interest company.
So I'm going to introduce the other two. So at the far end we've got Benjamin Mee, who is our CEO here at Dartmoor Zoo. He's also a science journalist background, so he knows all about this, and he's the whole inspiration behind this zoo coming back to life. So we've got him here, and we've also got Scott, who's actually just nearly up to a year working with us now. Dragged him over from Texas, right, so all around the world with animals, and he's come here as our Director of Animal Care and Veterinary Services. So yeah, loads of knowledge and yeah. Thank you very much. Open to the floor, basically. Any questions or ideas? We're going to start kind of walking through. Go on, Adam.
Ben, if you can buy a zoo, can you buy fun?
Well, I'll just start by saying my next book is going to be called Never Buy a Zoo. I would strongly recommend, if anyone's ever thinking of doing that, that they don't. But coming to a zoo or working in a zoo or using a zoo as a therapeutic tool, I think, can be very beneficial and fun. And I often see people having fun here, I've noticed it. But my background, as Coral said, was as a science journalist. And for many years I was kind of interested in the idea of biophilia, a term coined by Professor E.O. Wilson, I think in the 80s, as late as that, where he noticed that there was a measurable effect of nature on the well-being of people, because we come from nature, and we've evolved in nature, and we're not really particularly well adapted to spending time in rooms like this where there's no natural light and no trees. And there are all kinds of experiments where they have things like exam students broken into groups, and one group has a potted plant on the desk, and they could do slightly better than the group that doesn't have the potted plant on the desk. And if you show a photograph of a tree to someone in a stressful office, it lowers their heart rate. Just measure it just a tiny bit. And now hospitals are starting to use this a bit with photographs of nature in the wards. But it occurred to me when we came here that this is a biophilia site, and one of the most powerful things that we do is allow volunteers to come and rake up the leaves, which obviously saves us thousands and thousands of pounds a year, but also increases the bottom line for EE, the phone company down in Plimpton, where 800 people sit in a call centre taking the nation's complaints. So it's a sad little industrial shed down there full of very fraught people whose time and output is measured down to the second. I think they're supposed to take 750 seconds per phone call. And if they go outside that by too much, there's a little red light comes up on someone's desk. They're supposed to upsell 2 products and calm down someone whose phone isn't working and blaming them. So they're very happy to come up here and sweep up the leaves. And they've noticed, by measuring these guys very, very closely, that their customer satisfaction rating skyrockets for the next 2 weeks, and then possibly even for a month. So it actually saves money, makes their employees more productive to give them time away from the shed and in nature. Whether it's raining or not, the benefit's there. And I wrote an article in the year 2000 on Professor Dr. William Bird, who prescribed walks in the countryside, set up the Green Gym, and noticed that you can put the same numbers on as if they were at the gym in terms of cardiovascular improvement, but also social well-being. And so I spent the last 15 years, as well as trying to sort of stabilise this place, trying to encourage that dynamic here, use this place as a therapeutic tool. And we now have quite an advanced social prescribing program where you take people with mild depression and social exclusion. And also the Super Kids, which is just unbelievable that we can change the trajectory of a whole life just by the right strategic intervention with nature, but also partly with the mentoring, the very cool people that they meet, but also a tiger, throw in a tiger, that really gets people's attention. We found that with the veterans in particular, veterans with post-traumatic stress, extremely hard cohort to reach because they only really relate to other veterans who've been through the same thing. They also relate to tigers and jaguars, anything that can scare the crap out of them and kill them, they're really interested in. And then when you've got their attention, you put them inside the enclosure. Obviously, we put the animal away now, but they're looking over their shoulder the whole time thinking, whoa, this is a danger zone, I like danger zones. What have we got to do here? And then they start to come alive again. And I think that use of zoos is something that I'm hoping will develop more in the future, that everyone will realise that as well as a show and tell education opportunity, you've also got a massive therapeutic opportunity with every animal that you've got really in captivity.
It's also worth saying with the work that we do with all of those groups, one, they're having fun, and secondly, we've got that opportunity to pass over this conservation message, and they really feel quite connected to where they are at all times, don't they?
They do.
It's a really good thing.
They become ambassadors, and that's what you need. Is sort of to light the fire in other people. It's not just constantly doing it yourself. sort of set people going, and then they go off into the world as advocates for nature. And also, just to sort of going on a bit here, but it puts a value on nature, and I've noticed that here, trying to run the place, there's no point appealing to people's financiers and banks and people like that. They're just not interested in your motives. They're only interested in the bottom line and return on investment. So if you can sell it to the government, the man, them, that nature actually saves you money. It's cheaper to send people out to places like this or into the woods, rather than chop the woods down and widen the road, which they do outside Derriford Hospital. If you encourage the trees will ultimately save you money. And I think that's the argument we have to try and win. Nature is sort of cost effective in the health system.
Thank you, Ben. All right. Okay, any other questions? Go for it, Matt.
So, Matt Lewis painted zoo. Is a zoo nature?
Who wants that one?
Whoever's got the most controversial.
Well, can I
Go for
answer
it.
that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, is zoo nature? Well, I think there are many, obviously, potential answers to that question. I think for myself, trying to represent the average, everyday working family, who are the people coming through your doors to a zoo, is that they don't necessarily know what nature is, and any experience outside into anything to do with animals, I think absolutely could be and should be counted as a nature experience. And then we are in that privileged position where you can inspire and teach and influence on top of that, rather than almost over science it. You don't need. I think you don't need to. It is just. It's an experience. It's great. This is what it is, and carry that on.
I mean, you could argue that in the same way that beavers build dams, that humans build buildings and zoos, that anything is natural from that point of view. But that devalues the whole point of the notion of nature. I'm going to do what Ben did and take the question and then talk about something completely different.
I was a journalist, but I tried.
It seems to me that Lorna's thrown out a challenge, which is to say, look, things have clearly changed in the last few years, and it's made us stop and think in lots of interesting, potentially very challenging ways about what we do and why we do it and where are we going. And the fifth word she mentioned were values. And I was talking to a colleague yesterday about writing a book on values and museums and galleries and aquarium zoos and things. It's arguing it's time to have a refresh, time to have a rethink about the values and the purposes of what we're doing. And it seems to me that places like where you work have become very good at being visitor attractions and places of education and places that sort of are cultural centres of this country and of elsewhere. But what we're not so good at is being agents of social change. Nobody in the room would argue that we need to keep things as they are. Society has to change. Inequity is getting greater, not smaller. Who's going to do it? Either you decide that you're going to take a greater role in social change, or you're going to be happy letting other people do it. And we have to, I think, as a group, decide that we are going to take a greater role in social change. And that requires changing what we do, going back to our values, and looking at, it's better, some people say the difference between leadership and management is about doing things right. But leadership is doing the right thing. And I have to think we have to take occasions like this and say, what should we be doing? This is the right thing. How do we take up the challenge that Lorna's offered us? And if we don't, we'll be here in 10 years' time having another presentation saying we've got to do things differently. We have to do things differently. And the question we have to think about is, what is it we're going to do and how do we do it. One example, I think, just to close, is Monterey Bay Aquarium had that campaign years ago with sustainable fish, and people would go away. They wouldn't go away with just pictures of things. They'd go away with something they could do that evening in a restaurant that would make a difference. That, I think, is what we should all be doing.
Can I add to that briefly? Because one of the roles I've taken on over the last few years is working with a local sustainability charity in South Brent, and we are predominantly made up of the same people doing the same things all the time, trying to engage other people in the community, other families. And interestingly, when we have tried to do free things or free activities for people, they haven't come. There's been very little engagement. But actually, as soon as you offer something at a discounted rate, or we have been able to get funding for something, that it's a really odd thing. But if there's money in it and there's a value to it, and people assume there's value for money, and they can tangibly understand what that is, you suddenly get more engagement with it. And it is something that appears to be happening on a local level across the board.
That's something we found with our community access scheme, which I talked about on the first day, where schools can come infinite times and they pay £500 for that. We had some funded places, and the schools we gave funded places to that didn't pay any money, they could come as many times as they wanted, and they didn't come at all. So it's odd.
Go on, Nick.
Well, doing things. So we at Ashbury Aquarium have some days an absolutely fantastic relationship with our animal care husbandry department, and some days we don't. But it's really weird because I think we're all working there with the same values and the same motivations. So I was just wondering, Mr. Curator, how does it work here? Have you got any tips? Like, how can we, even in that microcosm of the collections that we work in, how can we work better when, although the values and the motivations are the same, actually you've got to feed the animals and make sure this is all right, and we've got to look after the public. Is that how can we work together better inside before we even try and work outside?
No, I think you're the right person for it.
We can't feed each other, it's just going to be that way. No, I think it's a tough one, because honestly everywhere I've ever worked in my life, there's always been that divide between education and animal care, and starting at the bottom, working way up, you feed off of your leaders and stuff, and if they're angry at education and think that you guys have done something wrong, then you're just like, oh, they have to have done something wrong. But as you rise up through the ranks and start thinking about it, you actually realize that, again, you are here for the same reason. And the more you talk, the more you interact, the more you understand each other. And so if you actually take these guys with you to go and do something like feed a tiger or clean out or something like that, and actually engage them in what you're doing every day, they start understanding more of what you're doing. They start understanding better about the animal, because unfortunately anything can read Wikipedia and we know most of it's wrong. So if they start understanding that individual animal better, then they form that bond, and I feel like that just helps strengthen everything. You work together. I mean, that's honestly the best I can give. Like, that's always what I've done, is just get education involved. Hey, you want to come with me and see the jag? You want to come do this? You want to come do that? Just drag them along within reason and safe. Obviously, you're not going to drag them in with certain animals because they react adversely to them. But as long as it's safe and secure, you can bring them along and teach them something. And honestly, you're going to learn something from them as well. I mean, I learn plenty from these guys every day, so it's not something that, you're never going to know it all. The zoological world changes on a daily basis. I feel like something new gets posted every day, and I'm like, when the hell did that change? So you just keep going with that. So yeah, I think just work together is the best I can offer you.
I think that leadership thing is really...
Exactly, I was going to say, doing this for 10 years now, it comes down to the person you've got in that role as well, and we're incredibly lucky with Scott, he gets it. He gets the fact that bringing the public with them on that journey and bringing the guests and the guest engagement and everything is so important. And I think Ben and I can both account to the fact that we've had people in the past that don't get that here.
Yeah.
It's that divide still, so it's very much down to that person as well.
Go to the pub too, that's a good one. That's my advice.
Excellent. Right, Rosie, I know you've had your hand up, sorry.
I just wanted to ask, Lorna gave us a top tip that we should monitor behaviour change. We can measure very easily changes in learning of our visitors when they visited our site. How can we measure whether their behaviour is changing?
That is a very good and daunting question, kind of the dreaded question. Because at one organisation, at Wildlife Trust, when I worked there, we went through this and we went through discussions. We're going through discussions at the RSPB at the moment, in the thick of discussing theory of change and how do you monitor that behaviour change. And that you can go down such a rabbit hole as to how you do it. I think when we were at the Wildlife Trust, we took a step back and we said, okay, we're going to look at the behaviour change wheel that looks at capabilities, opportunities, motivation, those three key things as to your audiences, your visitors, your communities, individuals, groups, organisations, that those three key things that then drive behaviour. We became quite quagmired in that, and it was taking us quite a long time, so we took another step back and said, we're really good at gathering numbers. We're all really good at that, and I think I would say across BIAZA and across member organisations of BIAZA, really good at that. Really good at that at the RSPB, the Wildlife Trust. We've traditionally done that, said, oh, 25,000 people came to 3 of our centres over the last year. That doesn't really tell us very much. It just tells us the quantity of people coming through the door. So we said, okay, let's take the number of people, let's take the actions taken, and then we can cross-compare, because we also are going to have repeat audience members, or repeat visitors, or repeat community members that engage with us. So we're going to take the actions and cross-compare those two. And then the third thing, we're going to take the impact created by those actions. So if those actions are, I don't know, we were looking at creating wildflower meadows, that was at the Wildlife Trust, as an example. We then cross-compared those three things and decided to monitor those over a year period to see how the change then came about and what the change looked like. And that was our way of trying to monitor behaviour change and keep it as simple as possible. But it is, you're smiling, so I'm guessing you know it's just a deep bucket of, and my only top tip on that would be take a step back, take a step back, take a step back and keep it as simple as possible. Because otherwise, especially for those of our colleagues who are out on the ground and are actually gathering that data, you know, it needs to be simple for everyone involved so that they can get it too, and we can see that we're making a difference and then able to celebrate it. Yes, so keep it simple.
Can I just add on that monitoring information that you have? Is that actually, so in work as a local councillor, is that local councils and so obviously your district councils and your county councils are all building climate emergency toolkits. They are all building plans. And if anybody can engage with them, and businesses can engage with them, and institutions can engage with them, they already have a format that they are looking at to see behaviour change. And at the moment, they're just in planning stages of trying to create those opportunities for businesses and institutions to add into them, but they will be there. And it's important to remember that your local government and the people that are in that are absolutely your friends to be able to share that information with you, because they'll be looking through social change and obviously the differences in the money that they have to put into social services, so they already know those figures, they already know what the impact is of some of those changes.
Okay, we've probably got time for one more.
Zennewijten from Marble Wildlife. I'm not sure who this question is for, maybe it's an animal care question actually. So one of the things obviously we're looking at more and more is that the connection to nature and the pathways and such, and arguably the disconnection to nature is one of the biggest causes and biggest drivers behind the current mess. To some extent you could argue that a zoo is the exemplification of that disconnection. Because the animals on one side of the fence and you as a guest are on the other side of the fence. Often they're exotic animals, so they're not from here. You're definitely not sort of with the animal in most cases. Is that true? Is that simply a design question? Do we just design the animal judges differently? Or how do we fight through that? How do we make sure that the zoo is not that disconnection exemplified?
I'd love to start trying to answer that and then maybe Scott. So we have this debate at the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust because it's a collection and not a collection, kind of one and the same thing. And we debated about the concrete pathways and does it really give that wild experience, and do we actually lend ourselves to disconnection from nature, and then turning to other ENGOs like the RSPB, the Wildlife Trust, that create much more, or don't create necessarily, just have wild experiences where you go straight out into a nature reserve. But we took a step back and we talked to different audience members about it. And one group were from Ujima Radio in Bristol, and this was coming to WWT Slimbridge. And when they visited, they shared with us, of course this is a connection to nature. For us, this is the first step. Actually, by having a concrete path, by having a more manicured provision, then it allows us access to something that otherwise we might not have engaged with, number one. And secondly, they said in your collections, there's heritage that relates to me and my heritage. And one thing you could do to make the connection even stronger is celebrate that connection to diversity and celebrate that connection to heritage a little bit more. Talk to me a bit more about the connection of that heritage. But because I can see it, I immediately feel connected because there's a heritage, not just nature connection piece here. And so it didn't matter that those animals were behind a fence or were under netting. They spoke to them, and that was their feedback. And that really buoyed us up that we were doing the right thing. I do think if you have the chance to have a mix of a more immersive wild experience as well as that more manicured experience in your collection, then brilliant, you're onto it, That's my feedback.
Yeah. It's always a tough one because obviously when you're designing habitats, you've got to design basically, I'm always going to look at it from the animal standpoint, and every keeper you speak to is going to be like, I don't care what the public think, it's the animal's welfare, it's priority. But if people can't see the animal, they're not going to come to your zoo, and they're not going to have a good experience, and you're going to get that immersive thing. So you've got to design a habitat that is an immersive experience, that's safe for the person and safe for the animal. And there's a really good book, I think it's called The 12 Basic Rules of Exhibit Design. So I suggest if you have animal care people or organizers, you get them to read it. It's really good, and it's all about how close can you bring somebody to that animal within a safe distance that creates that bond. Because that's what you're trying to create is, like you said, no walls, no caging, no mesh, no looking like they're kept in captivity. It's no longer exhibits, it's no longer cages, it's habitats, because those are both words that feel like they're in captivity, which obviously they are, but the public perception is everything. So when you design something that's, for instance, what we're trying to do now with the more leopard habitat is how do you give people that closeness without letting them get too close to something that can kill them. And for now, windows is possibly one of the best options right now. If there's a way to have an elevated platform into something, you can look at that stuff. But yeah, I always try to design something that brings somebody super close, has great, as you said, explain everything on the wall and talk to them about it, because I live honestly by the saying that honestly you're only going to conserve what you love. You're only going to love what you understand, you're only going to understand what you're taught. And that's very true. Like if you don't give that person that connection, they're just going to go away like, oh cool, it's a cat, whatever. I could have one as a pet. But you've got to get them to get that closeness and feel that presence of that animal, and that actually generates something inside them that makes them want to go away and go, I really need to help this means something to me. And that's what I always try to create when I design habitats. It may not always work that way because obviously it will cost a fortune, and many zoos don't have millions and millions and millions of pounds, dollars. America has a lot more money. They can create these beautiful things. If you go to Columbus Zoo, you'll see this wonderful lions are kept, just a moat from the prey. Everybody thinks they're in the same habitat, but they're makes that better experience for everybody. So from my standpoint, that's what I try to create every time.
Keeps trying to spend their money.
So I think, so connection is primarily a mental thing, and although the touching things enhances that experience. So it's all about imagination, and I think as long as you can create enough activities and experiences that people's imaginations are stimulated, you are more likely to make that connection. And that could be from virtual reality, it could be from themes on the website before and afterwards, allowing people to take photographs. There's all sorts of ways that that connection can be made and enhanced. And it's also important that people know when they've been here or wherever, where they could go next to enhance that and take that further. There has to be some sort of progression in terms of people's experiences. So when people leave here, do they know what the different options are as to where they can go next, and what they can do to make that imagination, those memories, stay longer. It's like going on. There's a reason we take photographs when we go on holiday, partly to show the people, but partly to sit at night and look through them and get that feeling coming back of what it was like to be there. And that's what we should be doing. That's one function of the shop, to give people memories so they can sit and think, and it comes back. That's what connection feels like, I think.
You know, sorry. Very quickly, thinking about connection and obviously behaviour change induced by connection, and you mentioned the shop, so obviously I work in retail as well in my spare time, and one of the things that retailers always do to try and get consumers to make behaviour changes is that you have to get someone to engage in that same behaviour change 3 times. So it has to be a repeated experience. So either you are reliving it and you repeat it, and if you can do that after the 3rd time, they are more likely to stick with that as a behaviour change rather than get bamboozled by it all again. And marketing companies spend an awful lot of money, supermarkets spend an awful lot of money doing it by doing things.
Repetition.
Yeah, repetition. Continuing that experience.
Right, I'm going to have to wrap us up, otherwise we're going to get way behind, but I think we can talk about this for ages, couldn't we? Thank you everyone that asked questions, and huge thank you to the panel for their time today as well. I think you guys are hanging around for a bit, aren't you? It's brilliant. So we're going to have a quick break now.